Yo, how's it going everybody? You got Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. On today's episode, we're continuing our journey through the world of survival horror and looking at one of the most prolific series of the genre. We're checking out Silent Hill, developed by Team Silent and published by Konami, releasing for the original PlayStation in 1999. This game was an unexpected hit and really did change the landscape of horror games, and even gave its rivals some steady competition for a good spell. This entry would spawn several sequels and spin off into various forms of media from comics to feature films, and we'll start at the beginning and see how the saga begins and eventually move through the series. Without further ado, let's check out the story. You take the role of Harry Mason as you and your adopted daughter Cheryl hit the road for a vacation. As you round the mountain ridge, a young girl appears in the roadway, causing you to swerve to avoid her, crashing your Jeep in the process. Once you wake up, you discover Cheryl missing and begin to track her down. The fog is dense around you and the land is strange, but you'll do whatever it takes to bring your daughter home. Your journey is going to be a perilous one, and you'll meet some friends and foes along the way who may or may not have your best interests in mind. Switch on your flashlight and load up your pistol. You're now Silent Hill's newest resident. Gameplay-wise, you've got a third-person survival horror title where you'll explore the city of Silent Hill and its endless fog-ridden streets in hope of finding your daughter. Throughout the town, you'll need to find keys and items to progress further, as well as clues of Cheryl's whereabouts, which slowly unravel the more ground you cover. Creatures of the night will also walk the streets with you, and in their eyes, you're an average speed snack. You'll meet a few characters along the way, and their motives are all somewhat ambiguous, so it's up to you to decide who, or better yet, what you can trust. You'll have your chest-mounted flashlight and FM radio, which will pick up interference and ring whenever enemies are near. You can also carry an unlimited amount of weapons and items, having a nearly bottomless kit of supplies, foregoing the need for storage chests. Your weapons are essentially melee and range-based items like knives and pipes, to pistols, shotguns, and rifles. Ammo is sporadically placed throughout the city, and if you explore, you can find a decent amount of it, though whatever you can save will help out later on. Combat is similar to its direct competitor Resident Evil, requiring you to ready your weapon before firing, though where it differs is its hit strength when using melee weapons. You can charge or swing or swipe by holding the attack button down and letting off a powerful thwack to your ops. You also double tap your foes with a swift kick to ensure they don't come back to hassle you further, and you can strafe and run tirelessly, so if you need to boogie, your trainers are always on the ready to leg it. In each area you'll find maps of your immediate surroundings, and your map of the town will adjust as you find various points of interest as well as blockades and alternate routes. Area maps will do the same, along with showing which doors you've already been through and which ones are blocked. The map will also mark some puzzle locations, making backtracking relatively painless, and you'll encounter several puzzles throughout the run of Silent Hill, and these range from placing certain items in spots to start a chain reaction, to various locks, sound, and visual puzzles. There are also several save points in the form of notepads where you can record your progress, and saving is pivotal since once you lose a life in the game, it's a wrap. You'll either have to return to the last save, or back to the beginning if you're really unlucky. The icons used for saving would evolve over the series, but the sign-in pad was always a special one. Considering you'll be going back and forth through most areas, saving as you feel needed is encouraged to save time. You'll also constantly shift from reality to the other world, where it's eternal night with a hue of fire and rust. These areas are nightmarish fever dreams you'll leap between, and everything is out to fade you here, especially in the streets where new enemies begin to appear. These areas will also wipe your last map's notes and information away and start anew. However, these rooms and locales will be dilapidated and at times gruesome scenes of who knows what, and these are where the boss encounters will take place typically, while also having more aggressive enemies roaming around in addition. Graphics-wise, Silent Hill uses a mixture of third-person perspective along with static camera angles in certain areas. In addition, some of those static camera angles will use rotation and panning effects, at times giving it a Japanese horror cinema feel. You can also recenter the camera in areas where you can freely roam, and as you run through the streets you'll always see a dense fog in the distance, and the parts of town that you can explore are fairly extensive. The points of interest here range from the Midwich School, Brookhaven Hospital, to its lighthouse, all of which have some nice detail, and there are several spots you'll see along your visit. You'll also see several of those main locales in the other world too, which as stated earlier morphs everything into a hellscape. The environments are mixed up a good bit here, recreating the Midwestern town vibe here well, with a lot of spots that you can explore. Each area will look like an average town on the surface, but upon digging deeper into the town and amongst the other world, there's a heavy occult presence, and these parts look intense even years later. The J-horror take on the Midwestern occult storyline is portrayed here with some at times shocking visuals, and there are a few scenes that will stick with you even early on through the playthrough. When the game first gives you control in its opening segment, it leads into one of the most brutal sights you'll see, giving you a preview of what to expect going forward, while giving away no details as to what's going on. The pre-render opening cutscene is an especially iconic one, showing off its cast of characters as well as some of the sights you'll witness during the game. This intro hit back in the day as soon as you booted the game, and it still has just as much impact now as it did back then. In-game cutscenes will often introduce characters with a pre-rendered segment and then switch to the in-game engine where the dialogue will commence. The in-game graphics are also pretty good here, creating some seriously grotesque environments and enemies which are a combination of rabid dogs, winged beasts, along with shambling nurses, specters, and sewer-dwelling creatures. The enemy variety is out there, and you'll encounter some pretty wild stuff. Boss characters especially got some interesting creations as well. Even the first boss is a massive split-head sandworm that can one-chomp you if you're not careful and get too close. The giant moth battle on the rooftop is also pretty sick with its Mothra-sized scale to the multiple enemy bosses you may face at the end. This game, much like Contra Hardcore, features multiple endings and enemy paths depending on certain actions performed in-game, and the differences between these endings can be pretty severe. With 5 potential ending sequences, there's a fair bit to see, and the impact will range from triumphant to soul-crushing with the game's worst ending. There's also a special ending if you can satisfy the parameters to unlock it, which of the 5 is the most lighthearted. Sound-wise, Silent Hill is a prime example of effects work and composition across the board. Between its soundtrack and the Foley art, this is a home run. The atmosphere created with the in-game audio is truly something, with its ominous sounds of creatures roaming the city, to the breeze of running through the fog-ridden streets, all with great audible detail. Going through each area has their own set of thematic background noise, some of which is calming while others cold. You'll hear a lot of things happening around here, and the audio overall is pretty immersive. The voice acting has an almost B-movie style of delivery in parts, while also laying in some deep and gasp-worthy moments. The characters you'll meet along the way are all voiced pretty well for the most part, and its in-game dialogue tells the tale of what's happening in Silent Hill and why Harry is here, and these bits all together are like watching a cerebral thriller. While not every line is delivered emphatically, overall the voice work is fairly solid with lines that will stick in your head. The soundtrack is one of the game's strongest suits, with an opening track that is possibly one of the most memorable tunes in a video game. Composer Akira Yamaoka creates a score that's frankly a bit of a mind-bender with his Twin Peaks style guitar tracks to the industrial hits and stabs of Roaming the Nowhere. These tracks all hit with grisly intensity with a range of vibes throughout the run. It's all got this dreary, at times drone-like sound to it, all while housing some astounding musical works. Silent Hill's audio would always be a pivotal piece to its puzzle, especially among the original 4 entries from Team Silent, often assembling some masterful compositions, with everything working in tandem to create a terrifying experience that really hits all senses, while also being a highly engaging one. Ever since playing this the first time back when it released, the audio was always one of the traits that really stuck out. Silent Hill is one of my favorite survival horror franchises, and going back to the original entries is always a satisfying return. The first game was massive when it released, and being one of those sleeper hits that impressed when it came out, it definitely left an impression after all this time, and playing through this again, it certainly holds up even a couple decades later. This is one of those games that's a staple for the original PlayStation as well as the survival horror genre, and the narrative this weaves throughout its run is also an interesting tale and sets the stage for the next mainline entries, many of which are in the upper echelon, especially the Team Silent titles. Silent Hill gets an 8.5 out of 10 and comes highly recommended to survival horror fans and action-adventure fans that appreciate a more cerebral twist. This is also a classic pick for games to play around the Halloween season, and for a thrilling playthrough that has a lot of twist and gnarly visuals. The multiple endings also add to the replay value, along with several unlockable weapons on subsequent playthroughs after that first clear. Horror fans will also probably recognize the street names are named after famous horror authors as well. There's also a staggering amount of Easter eggs in here, which are also neat to notice and discover. The US version is getting up there in price, while the PAL and Japanese versions are a fair bit cheaper if you're going for a physical copy. Otherwise, play this one however you can if you're into horror games for the original PlayStation. We'll take a look at the sequels down the line, since those are a high note in the following years, and a remake has been announced for Silent Hill 2, along with a new series entry, so this is a pretty exciting moment for Silent Hill fans. This is definitely a must play if you're into horror games, especially the type that get in your head once you've finished. And I thank you again if you made it this far into the video. If you find these videos helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you can use this as a resource. Check back often, we'll have more reviews and commentaries coming up in the near future. But until then, take it easy and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.